Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulillah. In the name of Allah, the compassionate, the most merciful. All praise is due to Allah. And may His peace and blessings be upon our beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Wherever you are, whatever time it may be for you, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. May the peace and the blessings of Allah be upon all of you and your families, Ya Rabbil Alameen. And thank you for joining us this evening. Let's talk about it on Thursdays. 2 days after inauguration. No, 1 day after inauguration. Yesterday was the day of inauguration, and today is the first day. And hopefully, inshallah, we pray that this administration is granted the success to lead with integrity, justice, and peace, not only for its citizens, but also for the people around the world who are impacted by the power of this nation. And having said that, we are also very pleased in the Muslim community that one of the first executive orders that were taken by President now Biden was the lifting of the ban, the Muslim ban, as it was known. And before we get there, I must really point out that politics induced anxiety is real. Political anxiety is real. There are many research and papers that were written on the idea of minorities, ethnic or religious, have a tendency to not do as well mentally speaking, especially when it comes to anxiety and depression. Ask any Muslim woman who is visibly Muslim. And by that, I'm talking about a Muslim who wears the hijab and goes out to work or goes out to the market. And they would tell you that there is a level of anxiety that I feel every time I leave home. Not because they are cowards, not because they are not brave, but rather because just the political climate, especially in the past 4 years, have really increased the amount of visible hate that people have received. And that has turned into people also visibly experiencing this anxiety when they leave home. And that is not only our experience, this is the experience of those who wear a yarmulke. We're talking about ethnic minorities as well, but it is established beyond any doubt that minorities have a tendency to feel more anxiety than other people. And in this case, it was also what was being proposed. Just to refresh your memories, and my guess, I know that he will go more into this. If you remember, December 7th, 2015, when Donald Trump was a candidate for the presidency back then, he called, and I quote, for a total and complete shutdown of Muslims entering the United States until our country's representatives can figure out what the hell is going on. These were actually the words of the candidate back then. Of course, one of the first executive orders that is taken was to, put a ban on travel for people from citizens of Iran, Iraq, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, Syria, and Yemen. That was initially challenged, but we will come to know more about this. And as a result, many families were unable to reunite. And I can tell you also, as somebody who has worked with refugees in my with my former job as the director of mental health, I was in charge of doing a mental health assessment for refugees. And one thing about refugees when they come in is that there is that sense of feeling of guilt. We left some of our family members back home. And the hope is that we will soon be reunited. So that guilt is just part of being a refugee. And I can tell you this as a refugee myself. So when the travel ban came, I know of people whom I have seen and I have met that the ban came and absolutely just diminished and demolished their dreams of being reunited with their families. But hopefully, inshallah, this is no longer going to be the case. Well, members of the Muslim community back then, they actually filed a lawsuit against against that executive order. And one of the people who filed that lawsuit was our beloved brother, good friend, Hussam Ayloush Abu Umar, the executive director of LA, Los Angeles, the CARE Office, Council of American Islamic Relations. And Hussam, you've been on this show so many times, mashallah, tabarakallah. I'm just calling it the Yasir and Hussam show from now on.
Pretty soon I'm gonna apply for the imam position. Be careful.
It is absolutely good to have you on, and thank you for being with us. So Hussam, if you can just fill us in, what took place, what was the lawsuit that you filed, who filed that lawsuit, and what happened today or yesterday? What does that mean?
Sure. First of all, Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salam ala Rasulullah. Pleasure, extreme pleasure to be on the show and to be with you, my dear brother and Shaykh Yasir. I would take every opportunity, alhamdulillah, to see you and hear you and be with you and the community. Well, it's an exciting day. It's an exciting day. Yesterday, all of us, we had our excitement, our joy doubled in a way. Maybe tripled for some. I would say the first joy was, seeing Trump forced to leave, basically, by losing election. I mean, for those, and this is not about getting partisan here. It's not about saying, oh, Democrats or Republicans. This is about a president who has shown discontent to the system, to the democratic system. Somebody who has promoted and fueled racism, bigotry, xenophobia, Islamophobia, you name it. Someone who has fueled this anti-black racism, fueled support and justification for this white nationalism in this country that we saw reach its potential 2 weeks ago at our US Capitol with the insurrection, with what can only be described as a failed coup in America today. A coup against democracy, a coup against peaceful transition of power. It didn't come out of from a vacuum. It came because of what he promoted. So yes, there was a joy. We can all, as Americans, as American Muslims, as minorities targeted by him, we can breathe a sigh of relief that he's no longer there. Some might celebrate also the fact that a Biden administration, despite its challenges, is going to come with its own challenges. A Biden administration comes with a rhetoric and promises and commitment to be more inclusive, more accessible, more representative of what America is, the diversity of views and ethnicities and so on. So that is, but the third one is, same day after the inauguration, the same day of the inauguration, within, an hour of finishing, he headed to the office and signed a series of executive orders, talking about President Biden, including, many good ones that we celebrate, not just this one, but I mean, the one that that touched us all was obviously the executive order that lifted or repealed the Muslim ban, which was ironically also one of the first executive orders signed by then President Trump when he got elected. Also basically when he took office in January of 2017. So the ban, as you mentioned, the ban went through various variations. The first one, basically declared 7 countries as countries where we would not allow people to come from. These are all heavily Muslim majority countries. You're talking about Iran, Iraq, Libya, Somalia, Syria, Sudan, and Yemen. So these are countries where no Muslims were allowed to come. No one was allowed to come. And why do we call it the Muslim ban? Because in the law itself, in the executive order itself, he made exceptions for those who are of religious minorities in these countries. Now, who is a religious minority? They're usually Christians or Jews or maybe others, but mostly it's Christians. So basically, Christians from these countries would get a waiver to come to the US, but the Muslims wouldn't. So clearly was directed at the Muslim community. The executive order also restricts basically, so initially, it basically banned the entry of all refugees.
Hussam, sorry to interrupt. Just on that point. So remember that the White House did want to change the name. And, they did not want to call it a Muslim ban. And I remember that there was a press, not a press release, a conference, briefing. And back then, Spicer was asked directly by a reporter, if it's no longer called a Muslim ban, why does the president's website explicitly refer to it as a Muslim ban? And it was after that question by the reporter that actually was lifted. So, because I know that some people were questioning that we are calling it the Muslim ban, the reality of it is the candidate and the president was referring to it as the Muslim ban. So sorry, I did not mean to interrupt.
No, that's actually a very important point. And that builds on a couple of things. That also builds on what you earlier said, what he said during his campaign, the complete shutdown, immediate and complete shutdown of Muslims coming to America. So, the funny thing is, what we're going to miss about Trump is the fact that he's straightforward. He doesn't hide his bigotry. He doesn't try to sugarcoat it. He said, I want to ban Muslims from coming. So for anybody to interpret his later action as differently is adding sugarcoating to what he made it clear in his rhetoric, and then in the policy itself, the way it was implemented. This is something, by the way, was the design of the infamous Steve Bannon, who ended up being in prison for fraud and money laundering, and then eventually getting the presidential pardon in the last few days. So, it's a bunch of crooks. So that executive order impacted these countries and basically put out a stop for refugees from coming to the US for 120 days, which he planned to extend, and for all Syrian refugees indefinitely. Now, other legal advisors, to the president at that time, told him that this probably would not go through. It would not be accepted by the Supreme Court, by the justice system in America. By then, the ACLU and CARE immediately filed a lawsuit. I was one of the 15 American Muslims represented in this lawsuit, led by CARE. Personally, my family is originally from Syria, so I would be impacted. We filed a lawsuit against that first version of the Muslim ban. Then there was a second. He knew he wouldn't win. There was a challenge already at the local court, the U.S. circuits. There were immediate stop for the ban, because obviously it was clear. It was clear there wasn't a national security basis. It was clear, random, that created undue hardship for people who were not suspected of anything. It impacted American citizens who were trying to petition their loved ones. And these people are being denied a basic right to petition their loved ones with no legitimate reason. So there was a second variation, and then eventually, same thing, the challenge, I want to save you time. And then there was the third variation, or the third edition, which eventually was upheld by the Supreme Court. What did he do? He played a trick. Basically, I don't want to get into the depth of the legal issues, but two things that they did, among other things, that kind of made it acceptable for the court, that allowed the Supreme Court actually to, the earlier lower courts had struck the ban. For this one, it was upheld by the Supreme Court. What they did, they removed Iraq, by the way, because of some pressures, because of business deals with the government there and some of the friends there, removed Iraq, added few other Muslim countries. So now the final ban, then became Iran, Yemen, Syria, Somalia, added Nigeria, so Libya, added Myanmar, Sudan, and added Chad, and then some restrictions, not full ban, on citizens from Eritrea, Kyrgyzstan, Tanzania, North Korea, and Venezuela. North Korea, anyway, they don't have anybody coming here. Every year, barely few dozen come here. And Venezuela, it wasn't against all of the people of Venezuela, maybe a handful of people who were part of the government. So they did that, and then they included a waiver system in order to deal with the undue hardship. So basically what they said, oh no, don't worry, this is a general ban, but anyone who has a legitimate reason to come to the US, and they're vetted, we will allow them in, and we'll have a waiver system, which was rarely given to anybody who asked for it. The overwhelming majority of people who ask for a waiver, whether it's elderly or people seeking medical attention, people who have been cleared from all, by all national security agencies, wouldn't get it. I mean, basically, the study shows that over 70, maybe 75% of those who requested a waiver were denied. So this was a horrible thing we had to deal with for 4 years. One might ask, maybe you want to ask that, how does that impact people? A ban, well, it impacts families. It impacts people who got married. So imagine if you are a US citizen who married somebody who is originally from Syria or Yemen. They wouldn't be able to come. You would apply for the waiver, and you would wait, not knowing when that waiver would be approved, 1, 2 years. And we dealt with these cases. I mean, local families that we knew in LA and throughout the country, where they wouldn't be able to. I mean, we had US citizens, we had a case where a young lady had to quit graduate school in America, travel overseas to join her husband because he could not come and join her here. Something that a Jewish American, a Christian American, a Mormon American, a Hindu American, a Buddhist American, an atheist American did not have to go through. Other implications were medical. There was a Yemeni family who the mother was a US citizen, but the father was not. The kids were not yet US citizens. One of them was terminally ill, and needed to come to join her mother. And couldn't. I mean, until CARE put some pressure, met with through members of Congress, and pushed the administration to allow the daughter to be reunited with the mother right before she died. I mean, there were so many horrible cases. So yes, we are celebrating the fact that this horrible ban was repealed.
And Hussam, one thing I can tell our viewers here, and by the way, if you just joined us, our guest tonight is Hussam Ayloush, the Executive Director of LA CARE. And if you have any questions to Hussam, please do use a chat box on YouTube where we are live. One thing is that this idea of refugees are here to only, I guess, suck on the resources, the local resources here. The reality of it is most refugees actually do not come to the US, or they don't go, they're not resettled anywhere. Most refugees become refugees within their own countries or in neighboring countries. And when you look around the world, the biggest, the nations that really accept most refugees are places like Iran, Syria, Pakistan, and Jordan. These are like the biggest.
Turkey actually one of the main.
And the US is not really that big, major, host of refugees. So that's number one, because the way that people talk about it, it's like we are getting millions upon millions of people. And the reality of it is that the most we have gotten was less than 100,000 people per year. And during the Trump administration, I think he barely made it to 15,000. I think that was the projected number for it. Secondly, is that people are unaware of the major contributions that are actually made by refugees once they're given the opportunity. And I think that this distinction is absolutely crucial when people are addressing this issue. So going back to what you said, what were the basis of the lawsuit?
The main basis is that it's unconstitutional because it impacts US citizens. So remember, non-citizens have no rights in America. So even if we treat them bad, if we treat them with racism, they have no basis to pursue justice. But citizens, in this case, people like myself, their constitutional rights are being violated here, because I'm getting less rights than my neighbor, as I was saying. Because when my son was getting married, if I wanted to invite my, his aunts, basically my aunts, my uncles, my cousins from Syria, they would not be able to come and attend my son's wedding or my daughter's graduation. Basically, if I want to bring my elderly uncle to come and seek medical treatment in America, something normal we do. So there's that factor, that being denied basic rights for me to petition my relatives in that sense. The other impact for me is, I think, to look into. I mean, whether it's how we dealt with refugees or how we deal with us. There's the Islamophobia impact. There's the psychological, because somebody might say, I'm from Pakistan, this doesn't impact me. Well, the reality is there were other laws being pushed and implemented and practiced by the various agencies within DHS that restricted the ability of many people, mostly from Muslim majority countries, by the way, from getting a visa, from getting a petition processed, from getting students coming to study in America. So we witnessed during the 4 years, not only the Muslim ban, there was this demonization of Muslims. So imagine you're the average Joe American, right? You're not Muslim, and you're hearing your president as a candidate say, I'm calling for a complete and immediate shutdown of Muslims coming to America. And then the very first thing you do as a president, you shut down Muslims from from mostly Muslim countries from coming to America. Now the average person's thinking, they must know something about these Muslims that we need to keep them out of this country. How does that impact you and me and our children at school or at the workplace? Or basically it's reinforcing a false image that has a price at the workplace, at the schools, bullying, discrimination, harassment at the border. So even as a US citizen now, it empowers DHS employees, especially the corrupt, bigoted ones among them, the CBP, the TSA, to mistreat me at the airport. And that is what happens to Muslim travelers now. When I come back from Mexico visiting my in-laws' relatives, my wife's relatives in Mexico, we come back. When I come back from overseas visiting the Middle East or anywhere else, we have to wait, be questioned, sometimes 6, 7, 8 hours, questions like criminals, coming back to our own country. And this is not my story only, but this is how the majority of Muslim activist leaders face. So there is that aspect. The other aspect that I want you and the viewers to keep in mind. So it's not just the Islamophobia impact on us and the rights impact and the restrictions, the impact on America's image as a mean country. You just talked about, when you talk about a country like Turkey, a third of our population size, much smaller in economy, hosting about 4 million Syrian refugees. When you talk about poor countries like Iraq hosting so many Syrians, when you talk about Lebanon, little poor countries struggling, hosting about 1 million, Jordan, when you talk about Bangladesh hosting almost 600,000-700,000 Rohingya from Myanmar, Rohingya Muslims. So when you talk Germany hosting so many millions, and then the US, starting with when Trump took office, 40,000, then 30, then 18, then projected 15,000, and if it's up to him, it will make it 0. It makes us look, and this doesn't come without the demonization of these refugees. So it's not only
he wants refugees from Sweden. Remember, he wants refugees from Sweden.
This is the only ones he would like, because what we do, we demonize them. Basically, we're saying, well, they're dirty, they are threats, they are terrorists, they are rapists, they are, and so on and so forth. While actually every study has shown that these refugees are among the most productive people and contributors to America's economy, entrepreneurial discoveries, growth. I mean, because when you're an immigrant, whether a refugee or a regular immigrant, you come in, you have so many hurdles to go through. So you work not only double, triple, and quadruple in terms of effort because you want to succeed. You know that the ceiling and the hardships and the challenges you have are way more than the average citizen, let alone if you're brown or black and then Muslim and so on and so forth. So that's why they succeed. They work hard.
Yeah. And Hussam, we have a question from one of our viewers here on YouTube. They're asking this idea of specifically singling out the Muslims for that ban. Was that Trump's attempt to win his base. Is that the point? And remember also there was a time, as one of the as the viewer has also pointed out, that there was a case where Republican candidates would distance themselves from Muslims because they were afraid that they may lose the conservative votes. What was his why would he say that? I mean, he said a lot of things. He also he was not very, to use it as mildly and as socially acceptable terminology. The way that he spoke about other minorities, be it women, be it Latinos, be it Mexicans, and so on.
Mhm.
But specifically, what was the hope from the Muslim ban?
Of course, I mean, as I said, it is purely driven by Islamophobia. Steve Bannon, I mean, he hasn't hidden his I mean, the guy is as right-wing as they come. And they knew this was about riling up the base. This was about appeasing and appealing to the base. And this base was not the regular average conservative. This was the right-wing, xenophobic, white supremacist, white nationalist, people who are afraid of anyone who looks different, meaning non-white, people who deemed Islam, or let's face it, or brown people, or black people, or immigrant people, as a threat. These are the same people who were cheering when he talked about building the wall. So he knew what he was talking about. I mean, this was campaign talk, and he needed to deliver on it. He wasn't able to deliver on the wall because it's complete nonsense, cost-wise, effectiveness, etc. But the reality is, yes, it was rooted in Islamophobia. It was rooted in appeasing a certain segment of his base. I don't want to say everyone who supports Trump is a racist person, but definitely everyone who supports Trump seems to be okay with racism. And that's the reality. You cannot say, well, I like his economy. His economics are great, but you're hearing him about everything else he's talking about. So I'm sorry, I'm not one of these people who say, yeah, we have to kind of excuse. I can't excuse people who would be okay with someone who has lived off fueling this hatred in America. And the problem is, yes, he's gone from the White House, but the mess he left behind is there to deal with. Today, we have to deal with over 70 million people. Many of them are very angry. Many of them are blaming minorities for whatever problems they're facing in the economy. They're blaming minorities for the loss of their favorite, candidate, and we have to live in fear as minorities. Black churches, mosques, women in hijab. We have to worry about our safety today because he riled up, unleashed a monster, a Frankenstein now that we have to deal with.
Yeah, and Hussam, I know that last week we discussed white supremacy and whether white supremacy is back into the mainstream politics. Would you say that what took place on January 6th actually wipes away white supremacy from mainstream politics, or is it actually putting it back into mainstream politics?
No, what it did, in a fortunate way, it normalized rejecting white supremacy. See, for 4 years, Trump normalized white supremacy and white nationalism as just another idea. There's a Black Lives Matter and there is white supremacy. Basically, that's how he normalized it. Like, you care about immigrants' rights, and they are xenophobes. They are equal people. That's what he did. The events of January 6th actually reminded us that's not the same. People who are calling for removing our democracy, people are upset because they're seeing the diversity of America being reflected in our government. With the Biden administration at that time talking about. So what it did, in my opinion, it actually shifted away. It pushed it back to the fringe. And how do we know that? We see one Republican elected official after the other distancing herself or himself from that mob. So, even Trump, by the way, could not defend them anymore. Even Trump had to make timid statements rejecting the violence that they brought into Congress. Because what it did, it shamed the ideology, it shamed the rhetoric, it shamed the people who has led to this mob attack on January 6th.
Got it. And Hussam, so what does that mean now that the ban is being lifted? What does that mean to the average Muslim, to the refugees, to the immigrants? Practically speaking, is this just it was on paper and it's no longer on paper, or practical consequences of that?
No, practically it means people can now reapply. People can get back to their petition. It means that many people have been waiting for their applications, for their loved ones to come, petitioning your spouses, petitioning your mother, your father, your children, your siblings. Now you can proceed with it. But obviously that also means there's going to be a flood of requests of cases. So I hope this doesn't just come with a repeal, but actually more funding to expedite the backlog now, because there has been a huge backlog building up. Because as I said, people are still applying, knowing there's a ban, because they were using the waiver. Though there were some who were discouraged, so they didn't even try to apply. So we need to do the at least to undo the damage, do what is necessary to undo some of that damage that has delayed people from being with their families, being with their loved ones, taking on jobs in America. There are companies that needed to hire people, and there were great candidates from some of these countries. They couldn't come. We need to work on fixing the visa program that we have that exists today, that also not only impacts obviously the banned countries, but many other countries, including mostly Muslim majority countries, where the chances of you getting a visa is slim to none, because you have to go through so many processes that's almost impossible. And even when you get a petition and accepted, the process of getting an approval had been made so difficult. And it seems very deliberate. I mean, this is not a random thing. There was less money, less resources placed in these agencies to make it difficult. So what we hope, and this is one of the things we are asking the Biden administration to fulfill in the first 100 years, from taking office. One of them is lifting the ban as he promised during his campaign, and we are thankful he fulfilled that promise. But there are other things we're asking, for immigration reform, dealing with the millions of people in our country who are undocumented, especially, we're talking about dreamers, people who are contributing to the country, people who have been here for many, many years, whatever the reason. Maybe they couldn't go back to their country because of there's warfare. Maybe they were demanded. People. So we need some immigration reform that addresses dreamers, young people who were brought by their parents as kids. They had no choice. If I'm a 2-year-old kid and I was brought by my parents, let's say, not in a legal way, right? They came in through the border, not through a visa. Let's wait about talking about their parents. But what about this child who's here in this country, who needs to be educated, getting the same opportunity, because they haven't committed any crime. They were not at an age to know what a crime is to begin with. What about people who are coming as migrants seeking asylum at our border, being treated inhumanely by our government, seeking asylum, running away, escaping warfare in their country, and seeking, as the international law requires for us to do, at least give them a day in court. We should hear their case and then decide whether they should receive asylum or not. So we need to work on immigration reform. We need to work on some of the programs that have existed. These are some of the things we were asking the Biden administration. Some of the programs that have targeted American Muslims, CVE program, the countering of violent extremism, the spying on Muslims, the watch list, which millions of people are on these lists and get the unfair treatment at the airport and so on.
And Hussam, one of the people that I had planned to be also joining us this evening, but unfortunately they couldn't make it, was an Iraqi family that was impacted by that initial ban. They were expecting their parents and 4 of their siblings to join. And when the president put that ban back in 2017, that just absolutely, killed every possibility of them being reunited. So yesterday was a very happy and joyous day for them. And today, when I called the young sister, she was actually on her way signing a new rental lease, moving from a one-bedroom apartment to a bigger place in anticipation that she will be reunited with her family. So to many of us out there, who may not really think a big deal of, these are just, people. We're talking about people's lives. We're talking about families being together. We're talking about people who were really, really impacted because of this.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to give examples, sorry to interrupt you. When I was in college back in 1992, 93.
That's a long time ago.
That's a long time. You were not born, I'm sure you were. So that was during the genocide happening in Bosnia. And hundreds of thousands of Bosnian Muslims were being killed, raped, tortured, abused by the Serbian nationalist militias. And some were seeking refuge as refugees. And at that time, the US government was way more welcoming and compassionate. And we accepted. And I remember welcoming several families in Austin, Texas, where I lived at that time. And the community welcomed them, the Muslim community and the larger community, and helped them. And I was amazed how soon, how fast and quickly this family that came, their family parent, husband, wife, and 2 children, young kids, how quickly they became engaged, learned the language, got a job, started a business later on. One of the kids is a nurse. The other one, I think, works in the IT field, very productive, very successful. Mashallah, now they're adults. You want to talk about success stories, talk about Ilhan Omar. Ilhan Omar, a refugee from Somalia, arriving to this country, helping in social services, helping in organizing communities, getting people registered to vote, becoming a member of Congress, one of the most prominent members of Congress in this country, pushing for justice, for equality, for dignity for all people. Look at the success story of Minnesota, where a lot of Somalis are there. The businesses, the factories they've made, they've allowed to continue to function. So it's just so many of these stories that it's a shame when people use xenophobia, to justify rejecting refugees and demonizing them.
And unfortunately, Hussam, there is history to that in the US. Been reading about the 1939 ship that was full of Jewish refugees that was refused US landing. I think there were about 900 of them, and they were turned into Cuba, and the Cubans would not accept them. But this idea of turning people away, unfortunately, there seemed to be some history into that, unfortunately. Hussam, I promised you that I was not going to keep you long here tonight, because I know that you have another show that you need to be attending to very soon. Okay, this idea of optimism with the arrival of Biden, is it time now to roll down the sleeves and just say, look, man, Biden is here. There is a new sheriff in town. You all chill, relax, and it's time to enjoy the peace.
It's time to pack up. It's going to be a long honeymoon. No, the truth is, let's put it this way. And I don't want to take away any credit from the Biden campaign. They have decent people on their campaign. I'm sure he's a decent person, even if we might disagree here and there on few things from his past political work. I have no doubt some of the cabinet includes some people we respect, I've worked with. So no, there will be some change. There is a new sheriff in town who definitely is a whole different type of sheriff. But at the end of the day, these are politicians. They're under pressure from interest groups. They're under pressure for various views and advisors. Not everything they do. This is, I'm a person who, endorsed personally on a personal level, not as care, Bernie Sanders, because I thought he had way more in common with my values. But Bernie didn't win, so we had second best. The reality is, even him signing the repeal of the Muslim ban didn't come because he had a vision at night. He woke up one day and said, what, God told me. No, it came as a result of an active, visible Muslim community that said, we will give our vote to the person, to the candidate who will defend our rights and treat us as equal citizens in our country. Trump said, go to hell in different ways. Biden said, absolutely. And he said, okay, how do we know that? He said, well, I'm going to hire Muslims as part of my team. I'm going to look into the CVE thing and I will stop it because it's unfairly targeting Muslims. I'm going to repeal the Muslim ban. I'm going to push for immigration reform and so on and so forth. I'm going to push, for some just foreign policy, at least that does not make friendship with dictators and murderers. Let's see how far he goes with that. But he made promises. He's going to push on these things and we're going to hold him. And how do you think he's going to fulfill his promises? By us continuing to do what we did before. We don't rest. If anything, the work is even harder today. When we protested the Muslim ban at the airports, along with tens of thousands of fellow Americans who were not Muslim, by the way, we were inspired. We saw that America cares for these issues. They care for justice and being, for people to be treated fairly. So we're not alone who care about justice. What we need to do is to keep holding him accountable to his promises. Remind him that in 2 years there will be congressional votes, elections every 2 years, and then in 4 years there will be another presidential election. So there's a price for not fulfilling the promises. They need to hear from us. We can continue to push. We have, today the Democrats have the Senate, the House, and the White House. So they have no excuses. But when do these elected officials act? When they get pressure. They need to feel the pressure, and that pressure comes from us continuing to be organized. Join your local political organizations, CARE and whatever organization you have in your area. That's fine. Be active. Learn who is your member of Congress, who is your local member of Congress. Let them know your views. Follow up with them. What do you expect from them? People don't do things when you don't ask them to do it, right? But if you ask them, there's a chance they will do it. So that is how we keep the pressure, because by being a viable, influential, effective voting bloc that is able to deliver votes and build coalitions, because we're not alone. Our issues are not unique to us. We work with the Latinos, with our Black brothers and sisters, with Asian Americans, with progressive people, with civil rights oriented people, with human rights oriented people, and so on and so forth. We are the majority in this country.
Thanks. And Hussam, just a final thought on this. I remember that a good number of Islamic centers, after this, they would invite their local elected officials, city council members, and these people into their local mosque, introduce them to the community, introduce the community to them. And that usually what it does is that it stimulates and it gets people engaged in the local politics. It lets the politician, these elected officials, know that this is a politically active community that cares about the issues. And I would hope that this tradition continues, inshallah, because I remember these meetings, they were really, really good meetings.
Absolutely. Like they said, there's a saying in America that says all politics is local. Really, even national politics and international politics is local. Why is that? Because eventually you push foreign policy through Congress, and Congress pushes the White House. Congress is, I have no impact on member of Congress in Michigan, but I have a lot of impact on my local members of Congress in Southern California. So that's why they need to see the power that we represent. They need to come and visit our mosque and see thousands of people who are educated, informed, committed, who vote, who understand the issues. We need Muslims to run for office. Alhamdulillah, we respect our allies and friends, but there's nothing that stops us from running, and many are running to Congress, local elections, city council members, school boards, whatever. We need Muslims in all the fields so they can educate others and do good. We carry a mission that advocates for justice, dignity for all people. So that mandate, we deliver it as doctors, engineers, imams, teachers, activists, but also as elected officials. That's how we deliver our mandate of goodness to mankind.
Beautiful. Hussam, it's been a pleasure being with you, and I really, really want to congratulate you and thank CARE on behalf of the Muslim community, because I know that you guys were in the forefront of suing the administration when the Muslim ban took place, along with the ACLU, and we're just really, really happy of the outcome of this. And I can tell you that as somebody who has benefited from these policies, I came here as a result of family reunification program, with the refugees, and to see that what this was good for me, and I just keep silent is not an option. I want the same goodness that was extended to me to be extended to other people as well. And we appreciate that there are organizations that we can rally behind, depend on, to be our voice and to mobilize us. And we really appreciate the work that you're doing. May Allah bless you and bless your efforts, Ya Rabbil Alameen. And to all of our viewers, please do remember that this is the time to get engaged, and it is the time to be active in your local politics, wherever that may be. And thank you again for joining us. And inshallah, we will see you next time, same place, same time. And until then, we want to say so long and Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.